Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Matthew, and today we're not going to be doing a figure comparison like how we usually do. I'm going to be doing more of a discussion video talking about how Playmates has changed their figures over the years from their first batch of Godzilla vs. Kong figures to their new Godzilla Kong the New Empire figures. Now, I'm going to primarily also just be glossing over the classic series line, as I know that those were obviously some hit or miss figures, but given the circumstances those were put out, technically speaking, the classic series line isn't really supposed to exist. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but like it was created in such a way where, like, if you don't remember, basically the movie was supposed to release at a certain time, and Playmates already had these figures, but the movie got delayed, so they were like, oh wait, how do we produce Godzilla Kong figures that quickly? So they had to scramble, find some figures, strike a deal with Bandai, and have like those very rushly made figures, which is why we ended up with such glorious 10 out of 10 figure of the decade, like the Shin Godzilla. And Space Godzilla, while it is still pretty bad, it's nowhere near as bad as this guy was. But again, you gotta understand circumstances as far as that's concerned. But that was back in 2019, 2020. Well, mainly 2020 because that's when the figures originally started rolling out, and the movie was set for a I think a March 2020 release, and then it was bumped to November 2020, and then proceeded to get bumped back to March of 2021. So now we're in, as I'm recording this, July of 2024, and we've got a whole assortment of Godzilla versus Kong and X Kong, the New Empire figures to talk about. So let's go ahead and pretty much talk about like the quality differences, how things have changed, some things I like about the older figures compared to the new ones, some things I think the newer ones do a lot better than the older ones, some things that I feel like should need to be fixed on some other releases, etc. So let's go ahead and start. So first of all, I want to talk about the Kongs. And I know people are going to be saying, well, why are you waiting? Why aren't you going to wait on the upcoming Battle Axe Kong that was recently revealed? Well, the reason why is because I feel like, because they're both open mouth sculpts, this kind of like, and plus they're basically in the same exact pose, there's really not a whole lot of reason for me to wait on the Battle Axe Kong, especially because, like, the Battle Axe Kong from the New Empire is just going to be using this one's mold, just with this one's Battle Axe. But back to the task at hand. I think, personally, from a sculpt and paint, let's talk about sculpt and paint. These two are very similar in a lot of ways, but also a lot different. See, the original GVK Battle Axe Kong had a lot of good dry brushing across its body, giving it a much more dark and grittier look. However, the sculpt itself was really more on the shallow side. I will say, like, when it comes to like the softer rubber parts, it has a bit more of like the detail you find, and it looks much more crisp. But however, even like when you look at the back, it's still there, obviously, but it just feels a little bit more smoothened out. And also, as far as like the mold itself goes, it's not necessarily the best, especially with the teeth, how it's all like so big on one platter and the tongue is so big in there. And it just looks more cartoonish rather than like, of course it's like not gonna be realistic, but what I mean to really say is it just doesn't pull off the look the way it should. Although I will give it praise where the eyes are painted, like I do like how the eyes are applied. That being said, it also kind of suffers from the problem of the face paint and the like the paint on the chest is just too dark. Kong was never like a full solid charcoal black creature like Godzilla was. He was primarily like lighter colored. This pulls off the look a lot better because aside from great fur tones, Kong's design really hasn't changed much aside from scarring. And I understand why, because of his battle with Godzilla. But of course, speaking of the scars, we have the scars on here, which I have to say, I think the GVK Kong does it a little bit better. But again, it looks fine either way. But something that the GXK Kong does exponentially better is the sculpt work. Because you look at the backs here, this is good. It's shallow, but it gets the job done. This is rigged. Like, this has some great depth to it. Like, this is defined detail at its greatest. And also the paintwork. Well, I'm not going to say it's like the best in the world. The paintwork is, in my opinion, leaps and bounds better than the GVK Kong because the teeth are painted a bit better. The only thing really is that they're not painted fully on either side. Let me just zoom in there. There you go. Eyes are not painted very well, although the application itself, I mean, the black dots get the job done, but they just kind of go cross-eyed. Teeth are, again, painted better on this one. Scarring's alright. The Beast Glove, bit of an unfair comparison because the GVK Con does not have it. But it's painted very industrial and almost painted all the way. Not all the way, but it does, again, get the job done. The chest and the face paint, that's really where my favoritism goes towards this guy because he has the, like, kind of gray spray and then kind of gray coloring compared to, like, the much more darker, riggedy kind of old man Kong gray. And then you kind of get to like the feet, which makes sense, you know, that's going to be like the most dirty part of the body. And then whereas here it's like primarily all black. So as far as like the coloring goes, I have to give it to the GXK Kong. Now, I feel like it's something that he does better than him would have to be the dry brushing. If he had the dry brushing of this Kong, best Playmates Con, no debate, no comparison. We wouldn't even need to do this comparison, that's what. But of course, maybe tone it down a little bit, maybe give it towards the back, because of course that's where we're gonna be seeing a lot of, like, say, damage and all that dirty stuff you see in the film. That's probably where it's gonna primarily be. Something that I also want to talk about is the posability. Now, pretty much speaking, across these two figures, nothing has changed. They have basically the same articulation count with like swivels at the head, swivel hinge shoulders, swivel hinge elbows, swivel wrists, swivel hinge hips, and hinge knees. That's basically the same thing. However, I will say that I find a bit more range on the original just because, like, it doesn't have, of course, for one, it doesn't have the Beast Glove, but it just feels more fluid. Like, it's not because it's an older figure, it's always felt this way. And, like, it always has, like, such a softer feel, and you can get a little bit more range out of it, versus this one, where you don't really get all that much range. Well, of course, you do get a lot of range, but it doesn't feel... It feels tighter, I should say. This feels just right. Like, as far as stiffness goes, this feels just right. Loose enough to where you can kind of glide the joints, but not loose enough to where it just flops. However, that also being said, this guy also doesn't have the wrist joint, but the other Battle Axe Kong will. So, as far as sheer posability goes, again, they're kind of even. I like the quality of the joints on this one a bit better than this one, because of how, well, they're just right, as opposed to it being like a little bit more on the stiff side. But another thing I want to also talk about is the accessories in specific. See, in case if you haven't really caught on, the Beast Glove doesn't really count as an accessory because it's pre-molded with the figure. You can't take this off. And if you're try to, oh boy, you're going to be in for a bad figure. But that being said, this guy comes with a heave. Pretty cool. It's one of those new futuristic heaves. I don't really have a lot to say about this heave, and even after doing like 5,000 plus videos with this thing, I still don't have a lot to say about it. This Kong comes with his battle axe, and it's not like the best painted in the world, because like I own two of the battle axe Kongs. Let me pull up the other one. And as you can probably are going to see in just a sec, this one has a lot more brown on it than the my original one. Because like you can kind of see like a brown splotch there, and then especially on this side, like oh boy, they went ham on the brown wash. So that's That's a bit on the more unfortunate side of things. So it doesn't really give much of a glowing effect. Then again, you could be the Hong Kong Battle Kong, where you just have one side purple, the other one blank. Ha ha. However, the one thing that I feel like the Kong GVK has superior is definitely going to be that battle damage. Now, of course, battle damage is a kind of a plus or a minus. -1, I guess you could say. Wrong kaiju. Anyway, why is it such a plus and a minus? Well, for pluses, it gives kids and I guess adult collectors a bit more of variety on the shelf. You can have it without the battle damage or with the battle damage. I personally, for one, don't mind the battle damage. It's not like the worst thing in the world. However, the minus is that you can, if you're not careful with this thing, or your kids are not careful with this thing, they could lose that piece easily. Like, that's about the size of like 2 M&Ms. That's how small it is. It's literally not even well, actually it's bigger than my thumbnail, but it's like that big compared to my thumb. Like, it's a pretty thin piece of rubber plastic. And also, when it goes up for resale, 5 times out of 10, I always see this thing without its battle damage. And it's honestly kind of a problem if you're reselling these things, because in like, I'm gonna guess like 10 years from now, when the GVK line is long gone, guess what? All the Playmates figures in the world are not gonna have their battle damage anymore, except for mine, because I'm gonna keep mine nice and cozy, hopefully. So that's primarily where my concern's at. But as of right now, the sheer amount of accessories has to go to the Playmates Kong from GVK. And as it stands, I kind of prefer the accessories of this guy as opposed to him. However, ultimately, I think that as far as like the better figure is concerned, quality-wise, it's got to be this one. Again, the sculpt and paint is just a lot better. It has the same amount of articulation minus the hand. And even though it doesn't come with like the best accessory, because it really should have came with the axe in my opinion, because he literally holds it at the end of the movie with the Beast Club. I don't see why he wouldn't. It's automatically clear that, you know, as good as this guy was, he's kind of like the new Battle Axe Kong, because he's literally getting a Battle Axe variant pretty soon. So, yeah, so state your pick.